please help me welcome Councilman Mike Conaway.
Do I need the microphone, or can everybody hear me all right? Okay, and that's so stilted, and I'd rather us all be sitting in a circle, but, you know, 50 or 60 million comedians out of work, and Ben's trying to pull stand-up comedy. Now, realizing, of course, that I get the last word. Now, you can write a lot on a real small piece of paper if you've got a real tiny penmanship. Anyway, it's great to be with you this afternoon. Wow, what a crowd. I've done town halls in Midland and San Angelo and Llano last night, and this is, I think I will get a head count from Evan. This is the biggest turnout we've had, and that is terrific. I don't know who all advertised it or how that worked, but let's keep that up, because this is a great way for me to do the job I think you want me to do, and that is be someplace where you and I can look each other in the eye, and I can hear what your concerns are, hear what your positions are, and give me a chance to communicate with you directly without any kind of intermediary or filters and that kind of stuff. And I think I can do the job better. It's been my experience in the 8 years I've done it that I come away from all of these meetings better prepared to represent the folks, constituents of District 11 than I was before I had it, because it's just it's a good example, a terrific example of the representative democracy that we have. And so every one of you have something else you could be doing right now that maybe even more important. You're taking time away from other stuff to do to take on some civic responsibilities to come here, and thank you for that as well. So I appreciate that. The format will be this. I'm going to make some introductory comments about two really important areas I think most of you will be interested in, and then the rest of our time together will be just a Q&A. And if you'll endeavor to not filibuster, I'll endeavor to not filibuster my answer. So, and that's hard for me because I've had a lot of practice yet. That way we'll try to get as many folks in the queue as we can, and we'll get to you. Any subject matter you want to talk about, doesn't have to be about the two that I bring up specifically. Everything, any public policy issue that you want my thoughts on, or you've got some thoughts you want to share with me on, that's what this event is for. And again, thanks everybody for being here. Let's talk about Syria, and let's talk about the Unaffordable Care Act, or Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, depending on your position and the pejorative you want to use on that, and the CR and the interrelationship that we will see that conversation the rest of this month going on. And I want to appreciate your thoughts on both of those. And then whatever else you want to talk about, if you want to talk about immigration or the nutrition title that's going to come up this week, anything you want to talk about. Syria. It is, without question, that chemical weapons were used. As I understand the facts right now, it's pretty clear that the regime used the chemical weapons on the oppositions, or the rebels. And for this conversation, let's assume that's the case. I know there's some other theories that are being bandied about as to how that might have happened or not happened. If it's in fact the rebels using it on themselves, that's a whole different conversation that we really aren't part of it. Let's talk about what the president's thinking about doing, and what you think about that as well. Chemical weapons were used, and as I understand right now, I think the regime did it. Not a person in this room would condone the use of chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons. That goes without question. So whatever it is we do or don't do, no one should in the least interpret it as any kind of that we condone it, or we agree with it, or that we don't stand in full opposition to it, period. I break the deal into two pieces. And I think it helps kind of crystallize what we ought to be doing. The first piece is that chemical weapons were used, and there was a command structure in place that caused that to happen. From Assad on down, wherever it was that happened, those people are war criminals and have committed war crimes. And I know how to punish them. I know that there's an international criminal court, there's all kinds of stuff that we need to unleash the full court press on to make sure the world knows the pariahs that those folks really are. Now, we'll be frustrated for a long time because they'll have to come out of Syria before we can get at them. But that taint, that mark of Cain is not going away. These are bad people, and we ought to put their pictures up everywhere we can, so there's not a question in anybody's mind that's over there if they're going to be a part of that process, there is a price to be paid individually. So I know how to punish individuals. So that's one part of it, and we ought to move that forward expeditiously, and I think we get pretty much universal agreement on punishing the folks who made the command decision, pulled the trigger, all that kind of stuff. The other piece is the much more daunting, and the one that the president's going to come home on Tuesday night and try to convince you and I that we need to do, there is something possible that we can do about it. And that is, what is it that we can do that we can reasonably articulate would convince Assad to not use chemical weapons again? And I don't know what that is. The options that are being bandied about right now, I don't think are effective, and I'm not supportive of that. Just to throw a bunch of cruise missiles in there, anything that's being, the specificity with which the president has talked about, I don't see that as being an effective deterrent. You know, I don't know how many of you listened. I was driving up from Burnett, where I spent the night last night, and had either the pleasure or the displeasure of listening to the president's hour-long ramble press conference. And I'm no more convinced now than I was, before. He's got a tough job to convince us that the use of U.S. military assets makes sense or would effectively deter Assad from the use of chemical weapons again. And if we can't do that, if we can't articulate that, now there's no guarantees, I got that, but the plan needs to be something beyond telling our military to go punish Syria. That's the command that most military guys would say, I need a little more than that. I need a little more specificity than that. You tell me to do something specific, we'll go do that, we'll make that happen. But don't tell me to punish a nation. How do you punish a nation? I mean, how do you punish a runway? You blow it up, I got that. How do you punish a weapon system or a building? You blow them up, but where's the punishment associated with that? And so the president's got a heavy lift. It is not my role today to convince you that we ought to do anything. That's his job. He's commander-in-chief. He raised his hand, said he wanted to be commander-in-chief for another 4 years, and he needs to take on that mantle. And I've been disappointed with him. Why he would bring up the red line nonsense again, like he did over the weekend or this past couple of days. He sounds like a petulant teenager, and he's the leader of the free world. So reserving the opportunity for additional facts, additional input. I'll get back to D.C. Sunday night. I will go down to the intel spaces. I'll read and review the classified documents, those kinds of things. But I'm unconvinced, unpersuaded, just as you are. Our calls to the Granbury office, to the D.C. officers, to the middle, darn near universally against just an open-ended authorization of force that the president could use however he sees fit. He's got to sell it, and he hasn't done that so far. You'll watch him Tuesday night. I'll listen to it as well Tuesday night. We'll hear from that. But where I stand right now, based on the information I've got, the facts that I have available to me right now, I'm unpersuaded that, yes, we can't let it stand, but what do we do? And how do we, and is what we do has a chance of being effective. And just to haul off and do something is, I don't think, in our best interest. Now, you can't have this conversation about Syria and the use of chemical weapons there and not, at least in the back of your mind, know that Iran and the leadership there is watching what we do. We've told them they've got a red line, and that is the start of developing nuclear weapons. And if I'm the supreme leader over there, I'm watching like a hawk what we do or don't do. So this is not without some collateral issues that are going on. It's not without some risks. It's probably, it is a tough area. But the world never needed American leadership more than it does right now. And our guy's got to stand up, and he's got to lead, and we need to pray for him, that he seeks wisdom, he seeks God's direction, and the people around him who are giving him his advice is more about what's in the best interest of the United States and not in the best interest of his legacy or his political capital, whatever it is that they're concerned about. He's one is concerned about what's in the best interest. And I know he says the right things, as he did earlier today, but his actions and other things belie some of the things that he said. So, Couple of quick comments about what's happening there now. There are no innocent combatants in Syria right now. Assad is clearly a bad guy. I don't think there's any question there. To the extent the Islamic jihadists, the radicals, fundamental Muslims, they are not good guys. Al-Qaeda, et cetera, et cetera. And then the Free Syrian group, and they are not Boy Scouts either. There are no good teams on the field of play that are currently there. Charles Krauthammer had an interesting comment last night. He said, you know, if you look back at World War II, the good war, we backed the second most heinous man on the face of the earth, while we fought the most heinous man on the face of it. We backed Stalin against Hitler. And so as we look at the circumstances in Syria, there's no easy answers, there's no silver bullet. It's tough stuff. I got it. If I had the answers, I'd give to you. I'd give to the president. I don't have them either. I just know that we've got to be very, very careful about how we use whatever influence we've got, whatever assets we've got, as we walk this very treacherous path. The other thing we have to be very careful about, and that is the unintended consequences of whatever we might do. That area of the world is a powder keg of the first order. And we don't know what triggers what. In other words, if we do something, what does that cause? Because many of these people don't operate in their own best interest. They really don't. They do some things that you and I would think would never do something like that to advance a cause, but nevertheless, that's where they are. By way of example, the Arab Spring was triggered by a fruit and vegetable street dealer, salesman, setting himself on fire in Tunis, Tunisia. Now, in a vacuum, if I'd have said that reaction in the Arab Spring, would it be triggered by this without the knowledge of it? We'd probably all go, well, I don't think so. So you just don't know what the reactions are going to be, and there's not going to be any way to know that. We're going to have to take some risks, and there's risks with everything, but at least we need to be aware that there are unintended consequences, or there are second, third, fourth orders of events that can happen as we walk this very, very treacherous path. And again, pray mightily for leadership by the White House and the President, because this is tough. I got that. But he's Commander-in-Chief of the free world, and he's got the most powerful military that's ever walked the face of the earth at his command. And we want, and all the other influences and all the other assets of his American policy making around the world are there, and we want to use them very, very wisely. So, let's talk about the CR, Unaffordable Care Act, defunding, those kind of things. Let me make it crystal clear. There's not a House Republican who doesn't intend to kill the Affordable Care Act. We want to defund it, we want to stab it in the heart, we want to not implement it, we want to do all of those kind of things. That's the goal. And there is no question. Now, the tactics about how we do it is where we're having the legitimate conversations. And there are legitimate conversations out there to be had. And nothing has been decided yet. The House Republicans will start meeting next Tuesday morning to begin the deliberations on what's the tactics we can use, how can we most effectively use what limited leverage the CR gives us or the debt ceiling gives us. Can we realistically get this and that? But don't question the fact that the goal is to kill this beast and not letting it implement. And again, we'll have some dust-ups and some legitimate dust-ups on tactics. But that's all it is. It's not a principle. It's just a tactic, and there ought to be room for conversation and as we go about that. Let me set the backdrop of how I see this playing out, whatever it is we decide to do. There are 16 House seats between Speaker Pelosi and a Republican Speaker in 2015. 16. As we are now in that season where all of these votes and all these things we take will begin to have a direct impact on how people vote in November of 2014. So whatever it is we do or don't do, we cannot ever lose sight of how important it is that House Republicans maintain control of the House of Representatives. Take a second, step back, and look what it was like in 2010, 2009, 2010, when it was Speaker Pelosi, Leader Reid, and President Obama. For 2 years, you got $1 trillion stimulus package that nobody wanted in this room. You got Affordable Care Act or the Unaffordable Care Act. You got Dodd-Frank. You got a variety of things that that none of us support and stood in direct opposition to that entire time. And President Obama was worried about being reelected. Fast forward to 2015, if we do something stupid and lose a net 16 seats, then it will be, again, for 2015 and 2016, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Reid, and President Obama. And he is not worried about re-election at that point in time. That is a terrifying scenario, and it ought to have a role, have a consideration as we decide what it is that we're going to try to get done. The mechanisms that we'll be talking about using, the only thing that Congress has to do each year is appropriate the money for next year's spending plan. The Constitution says no money can be spent out of the Treasury except by an appropriation. So we've got to get that done. The normal path would be that you pass the budget in the spring, both houses would agree to it, the appropriators, the guys on that committee, would go to work in both houses, the subcommittees in the House would go to work, bring it to the floor, we would chew on that, pass them, that work would be happening in the Senate, and then you bring them together, reconcile, the president sign it, and all that's supposed to get done before September 30th, which hasn't happened in years, right? So what do you do? What's the technique? What's the mechanism you use? We have settled on a technique called a continuing resolution, a CR. It is a terrible way to run a government. It's awful. Because all it says is because the two sides, two houses, the two sides, whatever it is, can't agree on next year's plan, in order to keep the government functioning, we'll just continue to spend money next year the exact same way we spent money this year. And what that does, of course, is that things that ought to go away and bad programs that outlived their usefulness, we've got to keep spending on. And things that are new and emerging where we really need to redeploy assets on, you can't do that. And there's nowhere in the system more negatively impacted than the Department of Defense. $600 billion of discretionary spending, and they've got to spend it exactly like they're currently spending it. It is a dynamic arena, and they need flexibility. It's a terrible way, but it's how we move this thing forward. Obviously, the threat is if we don't pass a CR and the president doesn't sign it, then no money's going to be spent on October 1st to fund the government, and we go into what's referred to as a government shutdown. And the president, any president, particularly this one, has wide latitude in declaring what's essential and non-essential. And the essential stuff keeps getting done, even though we haven't done the appropriate. Because at some point in time, the system believes we will, in fact, pass an appropriation bill for fiscal 2014, and you'll pay those bills and catch them up, and all that kind of stuff. I believe, if that's in fact the path we go, I think this president will make it as painful on House Republicans as he possibly can in trying to have the House capitulate on the issue. So mechanically, here's one path that can happen. And like I said, nothing's been. We've had 6 weeks being home, being back in the district, listening to people. We'll get back on Tuesday. I'll start being able to convey to my colleagues the strength of purpose that you have on defunding the Affordable Care Act and not implementing it. All my colleagues, we will be sharing those same kind of things and looking for a path forward that accomplishes that, but doesn't necessarily commit suicide with respect to the 2014 elections. Because in spite of some cavalier statements made about this being a risk-free path, it is not risk-free. So, nothing's been done. One way to get at it is to pass the CR at this year's at the reduced levels, which are already set, with a rider that says none of these monies can be spent to implement the Unaffordable Care Act, right? And pass that, ship it off to the Senate, and see what they do. I don't think they passed that. Ted and Mike Lee and others may have a path where the Senate does in fact pass that, and we then send that to the president, so it's the president against Congress. I know there are ads out there running that says Republicans in Congress can make this happen. We can make it happen. Republicans in the House can make it happen. I don't know how Republicans in the Senate make it happen. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Ted or Mike, either one, since they started this campaign of how they see us moving this process forward. And I'm open to how they're going to get it through the Senate. But for Mike Lee to say on the radio, and I heard a couple this morning, that Republicans in Congress can make this happen. I got the House side. How does the Republicans, Mike Lee and Ted, how do they get the Senate to pass this and agree to it so that it's then the legislative body against the executive branch? I think it's going to be, if we did that, and the Senate didn't pass it, and we rolled in October, I think it's going to be the Senate President and the media against House Republicans in this fight. And one of the things I've got to come to grips with, if we take that step, I've got to have some modest confidence that the President will capitulate and agree to not fund the unaffordable care act. And it's his single most important legislative event of his presidency. He likes calling it Obamacare himself. He's that narcissistic. And I don't find very many people who look at me and say, he'll capitulate. You just hang on, he'll capitulate. Now, there are 180 seats in Congress that Republicans will always represent. And I'm blessed to represent one of those. And there are 180 seats that Democrats will always represent, period. Right? That leaves 75 seats that ebb and flow back and forth, and those are the seats, those are the people, those are the voters, those are the individuals who decide who's in charge in the House. You and I don't get to decide that. We send a Republican, we're always going to send a Republican, but it's those 75 seats. There's really only one seat in Texas that falls in that category, District 23. And so, as we look at the guys who hold those seats, I could not get elected in any of those districts. And the Republicans currently holding part of those seats couldn't get elected in District 11 either. It's just a different world from what you and I love and exist in. And I get to see it and understand what those troubles is. If we go this route, shut the government down, and we go second, third, fourth, fifth, military doesn't get paid, the 10,000 baby boomers rolling into Medicare don't get to sign up, all the negative stuff begins to fix. With your backing, I'm one of those guys that can hold out probably forever, because you've got that kind of backbone and strength of purpose. The problem is, I've got a whole lot more than 16 members of the House Republicans who cannot stand it anywhere near that long. They are in districts where the Democrats, it's 50-50, or where President Obama won, they won. And, I mean, there's all kinds of dynamics out there that are radically different than what I get to enjoy in District 11. And what you guys see the world as and know the world is right that way. But there are lots of folks out there who don't see it that way. So as we struggle with what it is we're trying to do, again, there's no question that we're intent on killing Obamacare, defunding it, or whatever it is we can. Now, we have passed 7 bills of the 40 plus that we voted on, that the Senate passed and the President signed into law, that whacked on the Affordable Care Act. We eliminated the Class Act out of it, which was one of his big pay-fors in the early years, because we were collecting premiums and not providing any services. We've eliminated billions of dollars of slush funds that were intended to implement the Affordable Care Act. And so that's been signed into law, and we've whacked it there. The President has also asked for new money in the last 2 years' budget scheme to help with the implementation, and he's not got any of that. So we're doing what we can with the tools we've got. We've got a tool in the air and the quiver. It's called CR, and we're committed to using it to the fullest extent, to the nth degree, to get as much out of this guy as we possibly can. And if we could get the deal done, and we've got some modest chance to make that happen, then let's take that shot. But just like we're praying for the President of Syria, please be praying for House Republicans and Senate Republicans, because this is not a free path. There are consequences. And the consequences are losing the House of Representatives in 2014. Now, let me make a couple of political comments, if those weren't political. After action reports from the November 12 election show that President Obama and his get-out-the-vote efforts just beat the dog out of Republican efforts, equivalent efforts. We didn't come close to touching their ability to get their voters out. They got a higher percentage of their voters out who didn't even know there was an election going on than we did folks who were mad. And so it worked. And here's how it worked. There's a reporter who was tracking 10 individuals in swing states who were undecided. And so he was gauging his handicapping of the race based on those 10 people and where they were. He called them a couple times a week. What's the current issue? Where are you right now? You're leaning this way, leaning that. What's the deal? And so he was ignoring the national polls because he thought, I need to focus on the swing states because that's where the rubber meets the road. He runs into an Obama operative, and he's explaining to this guy, here's how I'm handicapping, and I'm doing all this kind of stuff, and the guy goes, Who are you talking to? I bet we're talking to those guys. He goes, oh, no, millions of people out there, you're not talking to those people. He said, well, yeah, I bet we are, give you a name. So he gives this guy the name, guy sits down on the computer, pulls it up and goes, yep, that's old Mary Jo, and we're talking to her. We've got her, we've scrubbed her Facebook comments, we've scrubbed her Twitter comments, we've scrubbed all the public data about her, when she voted, what she did, and all this kind of good stuff. So we know who she is. And you're right, last week she was leaning toward Romney, this week she's leaning more our direction. Here are the 2 or 3 hot button issues that she thinks is important for this race, and here are the 4 friends, her friends, who are our supporters that we've identified, that we've got contact with, that are going to go talk to her between now and the election. And we're going to track to make sure all 4 of them go talk to her, and to make sure that happens. And the guy goes, well, you just got lucky. He said, give me another name. They went through all 10 names. And the machine had all 10 of those names, and they were working all of those people. So that's what happened in November of 2012. The president wins, much to our chagrin, disappointment, I got that, but he won it. He has now focused the entire operation on these 70-plus seats, House Republicans. And we will have never faced, our incumbents and challenges will have never faced an operation that strength in a House district. Now, they're not coming to District 11 because that was a waste of money, but they are focused on that. The thing that is yet an answer for Republicans and conservatives is we can build that database. We can pay for the tools and that kind of stuff, and the RNC is putting that together so that the members in those specific districts that are going to be targeted like that can put together that same kind of dossier on their voters. What we've not done well is basically in your wheelhouse, and that's that grassroots thing. We lacked the discipline of finding those 4 of our supporters who knew this person, and then tracking those folks to make they got it, and then tracking that person and just dogging them to death until they went to vote. And that's where the grassroots, blocking and tackling, the hard, heavy lift has to come in those, like I said, there's only one of them in Texas, and they're spread out, but in a midterm, second-term election, the House of the party that does not control the White House generally picks up seats. So that we could argue that that's in our favor, that we've got some wiggle room with the things that we do. But we can't lose sight of this organizing for America, or organized for action, whatever it is, that the president has unleashed on the seats where they think they can hold, where we think we can take it away, and where we're hanging on to seats and they think they can take it away from us. 16 net seats between a Republican speaker, whoever it might be, and Speaker Pelosi. Scary circumstances. I've yapped way too long, so who wants to ask? Oh, we're going to pass around a couple of clipboards. This is a sign-up opportunity to sign up for the Conaway Chronicle. This is an email blast that we kick out periodically, telling you what's going on in D.C., giving you some of my thoughts. It's a relatively short read, announcing town halls, announcing telephone town halls, that kind of stuff. I commit to you that I use this email address for nothing other than official communication. I don't raise money off of it. I don't give it to anybody else. So the only thing you'll get from me by giving me this, your email address, or official communications, generally the Chronicle, or a special Chronicle if something big has come out, or if you've requested specific information on a particular public policy area, we'll use that email address for that. So with that, we've got plenty of time. Who wants to? Yes, sir.
Lee Barlow, UAT County.
Okay. Lee, so you and I, all of us can hear.
Okay. Actually, you spoke on the 2 items that I wanted to address. So I'll kind of take them in reverse order. The Obamacare. I understand the logic and that from that legislative point of view. But one of the things that the Republicans have been absolutely dismal on, okay, and I'm a member of the Republican Party,
sure.
type of thing, is we continue to waver on principles. At some point, just as this may be Obamacare may be his line in the sand, at some point we have to draw that line in the sand and say, we have to do what is right. We have to do what's right. If it costs us the House and we can get rid of Obamacare, or we don't. But I think that the people, if they see us standing up and that for once, because remember, one of the reasons we lost the election There were 8 million votes that didn't vote this last time in 12 that did in 08, okay? That sat down because they thought the Republicans were wimping out, okay? All right, so we need to stop Obamacare, because once you give the people an entitlement, they don't want to give it up. Now, whether you call it an entitlement or not, and I know that they labeled Social Security and everything else an entitlement, I kind of disagree with that label because I paid into it. But am I employer? Exactly. I would gladly have paid into something else, which I did also. But then the other one, the Syria. I represent the ERAT 912 group as well as being the precinct chair of the Republican Party, and I sent out down in ERAT County. We reach ERAT County, Comanche County, and some up in Hood County. I sent out an information thing asking, look, does anybody want us any type of military intervention in Syria by the United States? You know, I don't think we have a national interest in it. At some point, we have to stop being the world's policeman. I got 0 back that said we should intervene, and I'd be willing to bet you that you run a poll. Is there anybody in here that wants us to intervene in Syria? So, yeah, I'm just. Okay.
Well, I got you. I understand on the first point. I agree that we need to be as smart as we can about this. We may very well have to take that risk, just knowing that an all-in bet, you know, if you don't have a chance to win, an all-in bet may not be in my grandchildren's best interest. And I understand the threat that even a partial implementation of the Affordable Care Act has of ripping it out, killing it. Because the middle class subsidies will start flowing in January, and the health care, I got it. I'm an informed consumer on this deal. I understand that, and I'm going to be seeking. Obviously, I've not made my mind up, because it would have been unfair, I think, given this, that there is no real right or wrong answer on how the tactic that we use in this regard. Right. It is fairer for me to come here today with a relatively open mind to hear from you and hear what's going on. And again, I could hold out based on your support till the cats come home. But again, it's just so. Lebanon is one of the most conservative districts in all of America, and I love it.
Mike Alcott, I wanted to echo this man's sentiments that I think one of the problems and mistakes that Republicans make is that they're constantly trying to pander in anticipation of the next election. They're always looking forward to the next election. Take for granted the grassroots conservatives that they just expect are going to be there next time. And my wife and I knocked on doors for Romney in Ohio for 2 weeks, and we met a lot of the Republicans that stayed home. And one of the most common reasons is they didn't feel like Romney stood for anything. There was no principles there. And I think that they're making a big mistake by trying to pander and just taking for granted that the grassroots conservative core. And speaking of pandering, my second, I think the most important question to you is immigration. We haven't talked about immigration yet, which I think is the most important topic that the Republicans need to be talking about right now. I've researched SB 744 extensively, my wife and I have, and I've been given 7 presentations to various Republican clubs and Tea Party groups, and the title is Policy and Politics of Senate Bill 744. The policy of it is horrible, and I could go on and on, I do speak for it now. But the politics is something that I think is maybe the most important aspect of that bill. And that is, I think, that it's going to lead to national or political suicide for the Republican Party. I can quote you all kinds of statistics and polls that will prove that if you look at all the different last presidential races, Hispanics vote, the legal Hispanic voters, on average, 30% for Republicans. So out of the 33 million that are expected to come in here and be voting within the next 10 to 12 years, 33 million, 70 to 80% of them are going to be voting for Democrats. It's complete suicide. Ann Coulter is one of the few people that's writing about that. to give you an example, among Latino voters, right now, legal Latino voters, 28% support Marco Rubio. After all Marco Rubio has done, and people think he's an Hispanic too. And I'll bet you if you polled Ted Cruz, an Hispanic, his poll numbers would be much higher because he's got the principle. Rubio's been a sellout. And I'm telling you, Marco Rubio gets only 28% of the Hispanic vote, which is what Romney got. So I think, and so my biggest fear is that John Boehner has decided to do this piecemeal thing, and I think 5 bills have come out of subcommittee now about immigration. And the big fear is this Trojan horse that Steve King and Michelle Bachmann is talking about, how y'all are going to pass some bill, a bill that everyone in this room is going to support. It's going to go to the Senate. It's going to go in conference. Boehner's in charge of appointing those conferees. And then it's going to come back to the House where the Democrats and all of the committee chairmen for Boehner are going to vote for it, like it's happening with these committee resolutions. And then we have an amnesty bill that not only destroys the Republican Party, it's going to destroy the country.
Thank you. Let me defend the process we're going to use in the House. And first off, the Senate bill is unconstitutional. It has a blue slip on it because it raises taxes.
You have initiative blue stuff.
Well, it hasn't come over yet.
Right.
Harry Reid has not sent it to us, so we can't do anything other than just tell you this. It's unconstitutional. It's taxes, right? So the Senate's got to redo something on a vote to whatever it is they're going to do. That's dead on arrival. Even if they did that, send it over, we're not going to take that up. We're not going to go that way. If you believe that immigration and border security is fine as it is today, then let's argue to not do anything. But if you believe that there are things that need to be done in that arena, then that argues for at least having the conversation about that in a full open forum, the way we do on the floor. The bills are out of committee, not just subcommittees, but out of committee for the Judiciary, one Homeland Security. They're available on the website. You download them, see what they are. They are discrete pieces of the pie that we think could be done with in arenas that can be approved on that regard. We're not going to do comprehensive because comprehensive is a stalking horse. If you saw comprehensive health care, lots of mischief there. You see comprehensive immigration out of the Senate, lots of mischief there. 2,000-page bill, unintelligible, all that kind of good stuff. So we're not doing that route. We're going to do a Homeland Security bill that says we need to put some teeth in it. We need to have a matrix in place that shows how successful we are or not against some standards and move that one forward. We'll have a bill that talks about an ag worker program that's principally based on the idea if you're here legally you can work, if you're illegal you can't work. We'll have a bill that says we've got a visa program that is broken and no longer in our best interest. We give away 55,000 visas a year, green cards, by pulling your name out of a hat. That is clearly not in America's best interest. We need to focus those visas on the right kind of folks that would come and make this country better and improve it. Scientists and engineers and doctors, that kind of stuff. There are a couple of others. One of them I think is strengthens the relationship between state and local governments and their relationship to enforcing immigration laws, that kind of stuff. So we'll do that. Thought we'd start September. Syria is probably soaked up that time. It's going to now move into October, November. We'll bring them to the floor. We'll have full open debates, amendments, and you and everybody else will be able to see what is happening and not happening. It's a relatively small piece of legislation that you'll be able to have read it and follow along with and understand what's going on. And those will happen. We don't have to conference with anybody. And and the decisions as to where we go from there forward have yet to be made. And I don't know what that's going to do. I don't think anything happens in 2013, quite frankly. I think we'll do those things, but beyond that, I don't think that there will be any kind of conference between the Senate and House on any of the issues of immigration that we're talking about. Can't guarantee that, but I just know that we owe the American people a look into what we think the solutions ought to be for problems that most Americans, maybe not all of them, most Americans would argue that we could improve and operate in our own best interest. Clearly, border security and the visa programs, that kind of stuff, we can operate and improve those in America's best interest, and I think we owe you our vision on that. If we can't get that through the Senate, I got it. We'll vote against it and move forward.
But Congressman, the only thing that's broken about the system is that we do not have an executive branch. nor have we had an executive branch that's willing to enforce current immigration law.
Okay.
That's the only thing that's broken.
No.
The second thing is, are you guaranteeing me that when you pass one of these good bills, and I think they will be good bills that are in this room, if it goes to, are you telling us that Speaker Boehner will not then be able to send that to the Senate, where then they could attach that bill and go to conference? I mean, what kind of guarantees could you give us today that that conference won't take place?
None.
Because I don't trust John Boehner.
None. Wait a second. None. Okay, none. I cannot give you any guarantee, all right? All I can tell you is that's how the legislative process works. And if you're arguing that we should do nothing, that the status quo is acceptable in America's best interest, okay, I got your opinion, I understand.
And I am arguing that.
Okay, I got
Because
you.
without an executive branch to enforce,
well-
he doesn't enforce current law. Why would he enforce
Exactly.
your brilliant law? I'm not being facetious, I'm just saying.
I got you. I understand.
There's no purpose in passing new laws if the other ones are not going to be enforced.
Okay.
It's your reinventing the wheel.
Okay. That's a hard model to defend. It's saying that we just simply not going to do anything at all until we get a new president. And I prefer to do most of that, but there are some things that the American people deserve an answer from House. You know, one of the things I hear from you guys is Republicans never take a stand on anything. Well, I can't take a stand on anything any better than debating a bill on the floor and having it out there for everybody to see and through C-SPAN and everything else so that we know that it's there. I can't give you any assurances that we won't have a knockdown pitched battle over what you're talking about having happen. But if the policy that we're talking about is not good, we'll have a fight about that as well. And again, we don't have to go to conference if the Senate proposes that. We still don't have to. Mayor's committed to the Hassert rule that if they're not a majority of Republicans who agree with what's going on, we're not going to do that. And we'll hold him to that promise and go forward. So there are no guarantees ever. And like I said, you'll see the process in this regard. And beyond that, I don't have any prediction as to what might or might not happen. Yes, sir.
How do you change John Boehner, get somebody else to be Speaker of the House?
I did, because I think he's doing a good job. And I know he's, wait a second. Well,
Shame on you.
thank you. I get to work with him every day for 2.5 years now as Speaker, all right? The first 2 years, brand new Speaker, first time he'd ever done that, he was laboring under the misconception that this president and Harry Reid wanted to operate in America's best interest as well. And I got it. Wait a second. Hang on. I'm just giving you the historical facts. I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you what happened. All right? So that's why you saw him trying to work with the president and Harry Reid on whatever it is that might be going on. And then he'd come try to sell it to us, and we didn't like it, and all that kind of good stuff. In December of last year, he came to us and said, I'm done with that model. This president will not keep his word, will not keep a deal, will not stay bought. We're done doing that way. From this point forward, we're going to operate in America's best interest. We think the House Republicans believe it's in our best interest, and you see that process going. Boehner is the Speaker of 434 members of the House. He's not Speaker of just the 233. Now, how do you change it out? Not likely to have a palace revolt at this point in time, but in the election in 2014, we'll have an opportunity. I don't know, John, as I said, whether or not he's running again or not, but that's where you do it.
I just heard today,
Sir?
that if there's not enough votes there to approve President Obama's attack on Syria, he's not in what we'll call a vote.
Okay. I didn't hear him say that.
I heard that
I
today.
got, wait a second. Some mignon and his staff or somebody might have said that. Like I said, House Republicans get together next Tuesday morning, and we'll begin to hash that out. And I want to vote, quite frankly. And so we'll see what
I'd
we
like
can
him not to be Speaker of the House.
do. That's not going to
I'd like to
happen.
have a conservative as Speaker of the House.
I got you. We're not going to change the Speaker, I don't believe, until the next Congress, if we maintain the 218.
We could try.
If we maintain the 218, then we'll have an opportunity to have another Speaker election at that point in time. It is counterproductive to shoot Boehner today. It's counterproductive. We are wonderful. We are wonderful at creating circular firing squads. We are the best, absolute best and circular firing squads, and all we do is shoot Republicans.
We don't have anybody standing up for conservatives in the
Yes,
House
we
of
do.
Representatives. What has he done with fast and
I'm
furious?
not here to defend John Boehner. If you got
What's
a
he
problem,
done with IRS?
I've got, well, let me tell you about the scandal quickly. Well, like I said, we're kind of out of order here. Our process is kind of go for it. The scandals going on in IRS, we are continuing to investigate those. The House Ways and Means Committee is working that project. These investigations are much like a duck, kind of smooth on the top of the surface, but the feet are going really fast. They're not suitable for press releases and all that kind of good stuff, but we are going after Lois Lerner and going after those issues that the investigations have been going forward, Fast and Furious investigations are going forward, and so those are happening. So, again, shooting Republicans, I got it. We're some of the best at doing that. It's a wonderful project because we're a whole lot easier to hit than Democrats. Understand that, but it is counterproductive. Yes, ma'am.
Jan Vernon, formerly of Midland, now of Granbury. When is the RNC going to stop shooting at Republican conservatives? When they call and ask for money, and then they argue with us over the phone about our beliefs and try to belittle us over the phone. Maybe you can have some feedback with the RNC on that, because I've told them I'm done with them. I've got my hands full with the NRCC and trying to do the stuff that we've gotten on. To the extent I can have any influence, and I don't have a lot with the RNC, I can never voice those options, but I don't have that kind of influence with the RNC. That's a whole different organization altogether. Doesn't have a lot to do with House Republicans. We sometimes try to coordinate with those guys, but that's a whole different committee. Folks on there, you have a committee organization in Texas. There are 64 Texans on that committee, and I would recommend that you run them to ground and express those opinions to the folks who have the most direct influence on Reese Priebus and others. I'm not on that committee. I don't have anything to do with it, and I'm not trying to hide from it, but I'm just saying it's one thing to tell me, it's something else to tell the man and woman committee member, the two from Texas. Making sure where your state executive committee from the Republicans, it's making sure they tell our man and woman who are on that committee how you feel, and that would be better. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dave Eagle, Granbury. I've got a couple points, and the first one is this. Do you consider, because I think the Syrian thing is a smokescreen to everything that we've been talking about other than that today, but I'm going to get to one point with that. Do you consider shooting a missile across the bow into Syria an act of war?
Yes.
If it's an act of war, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says you have the power, and only Congress has the power to declare war, not the president, dictator of war. Why aren't you guys taking your power back and doing something about it and saying no to Obama? Don't put it off on him. It's you. That's one.
Congress does not have the power to delegate war. Congress makes war.
First off, hang on.
Okay.
August 21st was the event that triggered all this conversation.
Right.
We don't go back into session until Monday night. So we've had no forum on which to have a collective statement made until we get back next week. Because individually I get to do what I do, but I can't commit the rest of these other 233 Republicans or anything like that. So I understand your anger and your angst, but we haven't had a chance to do that. The president, in his conversation this morning, said he can't see an imminent threat to U.S. interests in Syria, which takes it out of his war powers authority, in which he can act, which he can react. So I don't know how he's going to unilaterally do whatever he's going to do. Now he said that he can't. Again, I'm not defending the president. I'm just saying he's got to prove it to you.
But here's the point. Next week it is coming to you guys. What are you going to do?
Well, I told you already as clearly as I could. I'm a no unless I get additional facts on which to make a change in my judgment. And I don't expect there to be any, but I'm leaving that option open because I think it's irresponsible of me to take uninformed positions on things that are hidebound where I'm unwilling to take additional info. That's not responsible. That's not a way that's not how I've done this for 8.5 years. It's not how I intend to do it. I'm going to get as many of the facts as I can within the time frame to allow to do that, and then I make a decision.
Fair enough. Point two. Are you going to accept the exemption that Obama's giving you? And how about your office?
First off, Suzanne and I, on January 1, we all kicked off the employee plans. All my staff kicked off the employee plans, and we started buying it in the open market. I don't know yet the mechanics of how the subsidy is supposed to work, so I don't know how I can refuse it, if I have to take it and then pay it back or whatever, but Susan, I'm committing to you that for me and Suzanne, we're not going to do that.
Do you agree that for Congress in general, that looks pretty bad? For the Congress to be exempt from Obamacare?
That's why we didn't do it.
Okay, well,
That's why, this president is a genius. He would rather have me arguing this inane point with you, the law's the law, and we get kicked off. So when we left town early August, he kicked out that tweet or blog or whatever nonsense he uses to communicate. Fox picks it up, starts beating the House and Senate to death over an issue that they knew that they were wrong on, because we had nothing to do with it. This was a presidential edict, total. I didn't have anything, we didn't take any votes. I'm on the bill that says that we can't take the exempt, we can't take the subsidy, we're fully on it. And I'm on a bill that brings other folks into this thing as well. I have some hard decisions to make with respect to my employees, your employees on the deal. They're going to be in the exchanges, and I don't know how the subsidies are going to work. As I get more of that information, I'll be able to make a better decision on that. But with respect to me, I'll pay it back, I won't take it, whatever it is. I'm committed to staying exactly where I am right now, but having to buy, just like everybody else, except the president, in the exchanges.
thank you.
Grand I don't think we should go to war in Syria, but at the same time, I don't agree with not giving the president the right to do what he wants to. I mean, it's like, he turned it over to the Congress, turn it right back to him. Not giving the president authority when he says it's in the best interest of our security. Now, if he comes up with something that's in the best interest of our security, we need to give him permission. If he can't come up with it, then I understand. But I have a hard time, even though I don't want to go to war with Syria. It is a war, and it's liable to start World War III, but you know, it's like the president is a commander in chief.
Yes, all the truth, yeah.
Easy. Thank you. Yes.
From Benbrook. Two quick things. One, the comment that everybody makes about us defunding Obamacare is that we never propose a solution. Now, I know that that's not the truth. We have Paul Ryan's plan that from the election, and I understand there's another House bill that addresses the 4 or 5 major items that people are worried about with health care. One, why don't we do anything? What's going on, and why are we holding back on releasing information? And the second thing, took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution, and obviously, before he even got elected, he said it has to be totally reworked. He didn't like it because it limits the executive. Right now, we know that he participated, in my belief, in trying to affect the outcome of the 2012 election by the investigation of the Tea Party. He has now done things that Congress has said no to the cap and trades, and he has gone ahead and the EPA didn't do that. Also, he has now delayed 41 out of the 82 statements in Obamacare. The president doesn't have the right to arbitrarily enforce laws. My question is, why have we, the Republicans, not taken some, and at least get some publicity out to attack him and say, you're wrong, and we're not going to support you?
Well,
I'm for teaching him myself.
the repeal and replace bills and votes are those replacement of the Affordable Care Act that we would argue to those who say, well, where's your plan? If you don't like the Unaffordable Care Act, where's yours? Well, we've got them out there, so repeal and replace, we voted on it, it's available. We may vote again between now and the end of the year.
Tell people about it, that it's available. Look at this website and see what our plan is. That's the problem.
Okay. I'm as frustrated as you are, and collectively, me and my colleagues' inability to communicate all the information that you need and that you want in ways that you want it done. I got it. It's a constant battle. We have zero help out of the mainstream media or whatever media you want to call it. Fox is limited help because they don't get it right from time to time as well. But there are only 6 or 7, 8 million people listen to Fox, and the rest of it is something else. And so we fight that battle. I'm not whining about that. That's the lay of the land. Those are the way it's going to be. And we just have to be better at it. And so I am constantly asking people, help me improve my community. Are you on the Conaway Chronicle? All right, good. I'm constantly looking. We've got Facebook and Twitter and all the social media things that we kick out, all that kind of stuff, trying to figure out how we best break through the smoke screen that is what everybody else is trying to tell you to get you those points out. And so I hear your frustration. I'm frustrated as well. And I'm looking for whatever avenues we can do. My team constantly tries to get me on all the Fox programming and all that kind of good stuff, and it's an uphill battle because I try not to say stupid things. And they'd rather have folks come on there who say stupid, inflammatory things, and that's just not my style. But nevertheless, we're trying to work that as well. So I hear your frustration with respect to that. On the executive authority that he is using, there are crafty lawyers associated with all of those decisions that he's done. The 41 extensions or things that he's done, there will be a legal basis for it. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a CPA, so I really just kind of talking at you like this, but there will be, if questioned on any one particular, they would be able to point to a section of the law that allows some wiggle room to, because things aren't available, whatever it is that's going on. You saw what we did in the House when we voted to ratify his decision with respect to the employer mandate being delayed a year, but we also voted to delay the individual mandate as well before we left in August. So we're doing those kind of things. I hear your frustration. If you've got some better ideas how I can communicate better, I'm open to any suggestion in that regard to do a better job. So, yes, sir.
Gregory, Cook County.
Yeah, Greg.
Just a comment on Syria and a couple other things. There's been some valid information put out that the rebels in Syria were notified that they're preparing for an attack from America based on the occurrence that's going to happen, and they were told this before the August 21st attack. I would hope that you, if you do find a way to change your mind for some odd reason, you be sure and get that information out to justify it, or else there would be need to talk about a recall. That's the way I feel about it right there. A recall election on your part.
No, I got it. What is it I didn't do that I want to get recalled?
If you change your mind on Syria,
Yeah. No, I got to sell you as to why I've changed my mind.
you got to come back to us and make a real thing.
Yeah. No, I got you.
Okay? We need to look back too, at these scandals are going on.
Okay.
I know you said a lot's going on, but we don't see it.
I know.
We see a lot of BS going on out in the media. We hear the McCains and the Lindsey Grahams going out there and telling bald-faced lies. You've got to watch out for those guys. You've got to get the information back to us.
I got you.
That's the most critical thing I human need to hear today.
Yeah. No, and I hear it loud and clear. Everywhere I go, I'm as frustrated as you. I'm trying to figure out ways to make that happen and make that. Let me make a couple of comments real quick on Benghazi and IRS investment.
And I'm already a member of your
Chronicle. IRS, let me give you a little nugget of information that you might not know about with respect to Lois Lerner. It is galling that she's on paid leave. I got it. I'm mad. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just irritating up to the extreme and all that kind of good stuff. When she was at the Federal Election Commission, there was a fellow who ran against Dick Durbin in Illinois for Senate, basically a self-funder, and he loses. And the FEC sues him for Federal Election Commission or campaign finance violations. This is a guy basically spending his own money. And I think the first round was at $250,000 fine. He says, no, didn't do it. He fights it, goes to court, wins. The government appeals, and he wins the appeal. So they conjure up something else and charge him $150. Same scenario. Goes to court, wins. The U.S. appeals, he wins that. They finally go through to get down to, they go to him on a one-on-one basis and say, look, if you'll pay us $10,000 and agree to never run for office again, we'll go away. And he says, He
That's
says,
old news,
will you
too.
put that in writing? And, whoa, no, I can't do it. Lois Lerner was the commissioner who drove those investigations. She earned her stripes there so that she then goes over to the IRS. So it is no small leap of logic to understand she took that same mindset to the IRS as well. That investigation is going on. We're gathering data. The Ways and Means Committee has a website out there that if you've got additional incidences of where conservatives or conservative groups have been mistreated or not treated fairly, get those into the hopper, and they're going through that. This is a slow, tough slog because you got to get it right, and you've got to be able to prove what it is the allegations are going on. And it is frustratingly slow. I got that part, and it's just not suitable to it's not suitable to continue to update everybody on what's going on. It just the mechanic, but just know that we're going to. Benghazi is one that I've got a lot more insight into because the speaker has given committees a specific list of things, committees of jurisdiction, lists of things that we need to investigate and get the answers for. I'm on two of those committees, the House Intelligence Committee and the House Armed Services Committee. On the Armed Services side, we have gone through and interviewed everybody that needs to be interviewed, and I'm confident that the U.S. military reacted properly across the board with respect to that wreck in Benghazi and did everything they could do to have stopped it, and it couldn't do it because the laydown of where everybody was too long to get there. It was over before they could have gotten there. The hostage. All right,
If that's the truth, then you need to put that out.
I am right now.
No, not you.
Right. Well, there are certain issues there that are classified. We don't want the other folks knowing where our stuff is.
We'll glass it over.
But if I have, all right, I'm on the committee of jurisdiction. I'm in the classified spaces. I'm getting the facts and the briefings, and the military did what it was supposed to do. We thought it might have been a hostage issue with respect to the ambassador. All of that hostage arrested apparatus triggered and deployed and went at it like they were supposed to. Everything around began to do what it was supposed to do, what you'd expect it to do. But the event was over in 7 hours. And we couldn't get there with those guys.
How about the survivors?
The stand-up, the survivors have all testified. We've asked every supervisor and every survivor, are you told, or has anybody said don't come testify to Congress? And not one of them has said yes. Not one of them has said they issued that order. Not one of them has said they've heard of that order or that instance. They have. Now, the survivors I'm talking to are the ones who don't want their pictures on the front page of the newspapers. They are undercover. They want to stay undercover. They want to continue to operate in our bed through this country, and they can't stand up and testify. But they can, in fact, and have come into the spaces. And one-on-one, we've gotten their stories unfiltered. We've asked them, did anybody tell you to say anything? Nope. You're testifying about your free will? Yep. This is what happened? Yep. Any influences? I mean, we ask the question every 6 weeks we can, and I'm not going to out those guys because they want to continue to serve in the clandestine nature of what they've been doing. The stand-down order. There were 4 guys left in AAA. The State Department, and that's a separate investigation, but the State Department chose to not have a Marine contingent in AAA. It was a choice that was made, bad choice, mistake, and it paid the price. So as the wreck is occurring in Benghazi, and all of that traffic is going on, we're under fire and everything's going on there, there was a legitimate concern that that same thing was about to happen at the embassy in Tripoli. And the 4 guys who were trying to go help got a command decision to stay in Tripoli and defend the people there and the interests there. And they were the only 4 left to do that. We've talked to the commander who made that command. I've talked to the fellow who took that command. I've talked to the same guy who said, made the stand-down comment to the undersecretary. We've clearly vetted how that misunderstanding occurred and that what was going on. But I am confident that the command decision to stay in Tripoli and defend the people there was one that many people would have made in the circumstances, given how getting the folks to Benghazi, getting them from the airport over to where the fight was going on, and all the logistics associated with that. Now, I'm confident that we've got that question answered and that the military did what they do. They run to the sound of guns when they can, and they obey orders when they're supposed to. And this order to not go to Benghazi and stay in Tripoli in case something happened there was an appropriate order to make that make sense. On the intelligence side, there are two questions yet to be answered. One is, who did it, and why have they not been brought to justice, or why have we not brought justice to them? And every time we have the CIA or the FBI or any of those folks in the classified spaces, they get grilled as to what are you doing, what's the update, are the resources you don't have that you need, how is it that we can get these guys, and are you fully committed to finding it and killing it and go to get the guys who did this? And I am confident that they are as ginned up about that issue as you and I are to make that happen. And it is frustrating because these guys are in a sovereign country that doesn't have much governance going on in Libya, and there are some logistics issues there, but we are looking for them and fixing them and finding them. And then the question is, how do you finish? And that's an open-ended question. The other piece that's not answered yet, and someone alluded to it a second ago, and that is, why did this administration mislead the American people all through September and into October? How can we, that's going to be circumstances that I don't think we'll ever get a satisfactory answer to. You and I know what we think happened and why. That's pretty obvious. But the proof, the emails, the communications, all that kind of good stuff, I think these folks were too crafty to put that in writing, and it was word of mouth and those kind of things, and so I don't know that we'll ever get a satisfactory answer to that. Let me criticize our team for the way that Secretary Clinton was not treated when she testified. We let her off the hook. I'm not only good, hindsight's wonderful, and I'm exercising or dabbling in hindsight. The truth of the matter is, when she was asked, why weren't you the lead spokesman for this whole wreck? You had one of your guys killed on duty. Why did you trot a Secretary of the UN out to be the face of this conversation with the American people? And she says, I didn't want to do Sunday morning talk shows. Hogwash. Absolutely hogwash, Madam Secretary. That's your job. That's your responsibility, and you should have been the one in front of every single camera telling us what was going on, and why weren't you? Did you know the truth, and you allowed her to mislead the American people, and you didn't want to be part of that deal? What was going on there? It's your job to have led that, and we didn't grill her properly with respect to that deal. And so I don't know that we'll ever get the answer. We know what it is. I don't know that we'll ever have the smoking gun proof as to what went on. Fast and Furious, that was continuing to go along as well. Now, the House has no criminal, the criminal acts that go on as part of this kind of stuff. Justice Department has to pursue that. All we can do is just let me catch you up on the contempt of court, contempt of Congress charges against Holder.
Yeah.
We filed and passed contempt of Congress charges against Holder, criminal and civil. Of course, the criminal is referred to justice. And so the Holder team decided whether or not to charge Holder, and that went nowhere. The civil case, on the other hand, is in court, and we're pushing it forward. We're moving, like a lot of lawsuits, that kind of stuff, a lot of dead time in there. We're looking at trying to do something like amend it to say that Eric Holder has to recuse himself from any of his job until he gets this civil contempt thing dealt with, that kind of stuff. We're trying to make it miserable, but nevertheless, that happened. So, but all we can shine the light of what happened. We show proof what's happened. When we don't bring the criminal charges, that's got to go through justice. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Jeannie Fott from Stephenville. Considering that we're in September, coming up on September the 11th,
Yes, ma'am.
all the unrest in the Middle East, do you know if there have been any provisions made so that we don't have a repeat of Benghazi in just a few weeks?
Yeah, I'm not privy to any specific things that state has done, but they're smart people. I'm confident that as best they can, you know, we don't have Marines everywhere. We don't have we've got soft targets all over this world. The bad guys get to pick and choose what they're going to do based on how recent last 9/11 was, this 9/11. I've got confidence that folks, the self-interest and the self-survival instincts, the folks who are in those harm's way will be doing the things that they're supposed to do to take as much as they can.
And our embassies reopened?
Real quick about Ambassador Stevens. He's a great guy, good heart for the Libyan people. He went to Benghazi on his own initiative. Any ambassador has full authority in the country. They get briefed on every single thing that's going on in that country. So Chris knew about all the attacks, all the threats, all the unrest, all the stuff that's going on in Libya, and he and his RSO made a professional decision that he could go to Benghazi, and 9/11, everybody knew it was 9/11, the appropriate CIA warnings had gone out, and heads up since 9/11, all this kind of good stuff. And so Chris went down there to try to work with some commercial interests for the Libyans, and he didn't do anything wrong. He made some decisions, and he went there and didn't do anything wrong, and some bad guys killed him, and we need to go get those bad guys. There were decisions made throughout that process, ahead of that we all second guess, that the State Department and the other folks made as a part of what we do, what resources are going to be put here and there, and in hindsight, we can see how we would have done those differently. Anytime you make a professional decision and it goes wrong, there should be consequences associated with that. We pay people for judgment, and you and I are frustrated that none of the people who were in that command chain that made some of those decisions really had any kind of impact on their careers, that kind of stuff. But the truth of the matter is, we all make decisions every single day based on the facts we have available, and many times they work out just fine, and every once in a while, bad guys get to do bad things. Yes, ma'am.
I had heard that the people in Washington, D.C. really are not in touch with what's going on in America as far as the feelings of the people, and I can see that that's true.
Well, okay, hang on. And what am I exhibiting?
Well, no, well, there are things that you haven't been heard of. Probably, I need the names of some people on Facebook, know their pages, and a lot of things. But anyway, are you aware that there are probably millions of people in this country that believe that Obama is trying to destroy America?
Yes, ma'am.
What
Well, elections have consequences. We thought we were going to get him last year, November 12th.
It was fraud.
Well, yeah, and voter fraud is up to each individual. We screened the Constitution, 10th Amendment, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. Voter fraud is up to every state to fix. It's not a federal fix in regard. And obviously Texas has taken a good step toward a voter ID issue. The reason Eric Holder has tried to intervene on behalf of the maps is because he wants to try to stop the voter ID for the 2014 election. It's pretty clear to me that that's going on. But voter fraud is a state jurisdictional issue, and Texas is doing a good job.
I know, I read that the government has spent, I don't know, $50 million, whatever it's been, to teach the people and to help them get identification. So whenever it comes up that they can vote, they'll have that. They should have voter identification. We shouldn't.
You know, the frustrating thing about Eric Holder is when he spoke at the NCAA convention in Houston the year before last, you had to show a voter ID. I mean, you had to show picture ID to get in there.
Well, we don't have that.
He operates for pleasure.
Those are the main things.
Okay.
I just didn't know if Washington was aware of.
I can't speak for, I can't speak for Washington, ma'am. I'm your representative, and you need to hold me accountable. Hopefully, there are good citizens in the other 434 districts. Now, the problem is, most of my colleagues aren't standing in front of their voters the way I am right now. And I'm not bragging on you. I'm just saying that I am, because I think that's how I need to do my job. And so you do it for me, you make sure I am, and hopefully there are good citizens in those other districts. Yes, sir.
I'll kind of add on, she said, Drew Shipley from Bluffdale, Texas, USA. We heard you say it earlier, we have a commander-in-chief that acts like a teenager, he's a narcissist. I feel everybody in this room thinks that he's done many unconstitutional acts. When will a conservative Christian member of Congress have the gall to bring articles of impeachment against our president?
You know, we spent 8 years listening to the Democrats make that argument every single day, and against Bush, and it trivialized the seriousness of that. Replacing the leader of the free world, who was duly elected, whether by fraud or not, duly elected, is the single most grave thing a representative republic does. And we don't take those steps lightly or with trivia. We do it with grave trepidation because it is a big deal. you know, we could do that. The Senate's not gonna do it, so it would be it'd be more theater than anything else. It might make us feel good, but it
But
would.
wouldn't it let the American people know the acts that he's doing that are unconstitutional?
Well, I mean,
They're all on the internet.
you know, here's the struggle I've got. I thought the individual mandate was unconstitutional. I suspect most of you did as well. The Supreme Court didn't agree with you.
What was the tax?
And so, you know, there are all kinds of, anyway, you and I think they're unconstitutional. There's half of the folks who like you think they're just fine. And so it's not a clear-cut, case in that regard. So I understand your angst, I understand the reason why and frustration associated with it. There's a powerlessness we feel right now for the next 3.5 years that is palpable. Because this guy's doing things and leading this country in ways that we don't want to be led. We see a different future for our country that's radically different from what he sees. And he's got the reins of the presidential power right now, and that ticks us off. And we're mad about that, and we want to do everything we can. But by the same token, we have a Constitution, and we have the powers to go. If he does something that I believe is clear-cut unconstitutional, I'll be on that ticket. But it's a grave step, and we listen to the Dems do it. Let's make sure that when we make those comments, it's a serious individual, and we got the proof in that regard. I understand the position, but I'm not sure how long-term it would help us. Yes, sir.
Mike Harris, from Grand Rapids. Nothing against you, so this is Wisconsin. Are you in favor of term limits?
No.
Did you see the news article when Dr. King was doing the
Oh, you mean where he's doing playing the game? Yeah.
Very
No. I don't listen much to John King.
Thank you.
Trying to listen to you guys, and I got my ears full of that.
I just say that his comment, and this was a set committee hearing on,
Yeah, on the very important, on the authorization commission like filter. Yes,
very important committee hearing. He didn't just sit there and listen to all the guard and everything that he already knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Now,
I got you.
do we need to put him back in there for another 6 years?
He doesn't represent me and you.
No, thank goodness.
And much of the arguments about term limits are about, just like this case, about folks we don't like, that we can't vote in or out. And so the reason I'm not in favor of term limits is if you like a really powerful executive branch, then make sure you have inept House members and Senate members by being uninformed, by constantly turning them over.
We got to write that right now.
The staff of executive branch agencies are there forever. The staff of the House and Senate committees are there forever. And they have undue influence on the legislative process. And if you have members who don't know, come here from sicko about what's going to be done, then they totally rely on staff. And it fully empowers the executive. So term limits happen every 2 years in the House of Representatives. Every 2 years, I've got to convince 50% of you guys, plus me, that I'm doing the job you want done. And if I can't do that, then you kick me out. And people say, well, that part of the incumbency. 2010, we beat 63 sitting Democrats.
Yes, we did.
63 of them got
And
beat.
the Tea Party did that.
Because they weren't represented. We have term limits in the House, it's every 2 years, and I know you're going to be a lot, some of you disagree with me, I can pander to you, and you say, oh yes, I'm in favor of term limits, and as soon as it gets acted into law, I'll abide by it, knowing full well it's not going to get acted into law.
But people see him sitting out there.
Oh, yeah. There are hundreds of posters that we can put up that said, this is why we need term limits. I got it. I got it. Barney Frank, George Miller, Nancy Pelosi, Deagle, Conyers, these guys have been there. I got it. So there's plenty of faces we can put on that poster. I just hope one of them's not mine. Yes, ma'am.
Michelle Mann, Grand Prairie, Texas. My husband and I both served in the Persian Gulf. I have 2 daughters that will be at the Naval Academy.
I know. Okay.
Yes, definitely. I have a brother that's right now deployed over to Afghanistan, and I have a nephew that flies for the Navy that is grounded because monies are being, yes, and, but my daughter that's at the Naval Academy tells us daily that their time and the money that's being spent there is on sexual harassment briefs and all the crap that they have to go through every day, and it's filled up their time rather than on things that they're there to learn. And so that's one of the things that I want to voice is, I don't know who allocates the money for the military, but I'm hoping that a voice can be heard that stop filling it up with stuff that's perpetuated with sensationalizing issues.
The chief here had very similar comments. We are under what, you've all heard of sequestration, and you've all heard us say that's a terrible way to run a railroad. It's worse than CRs, because it is basically just a percentage cut across the board. So let's assume the cut's 10%. You cut 10% out of the good stuff that you need to be doing, and you leave 90% of the bad stuff in place that you shouldn't be doing. So it's a rotten way to do it. But I'm unwilling to back off of it at this stage, because it's been the only tool we've been able to use to force this president to spend less money. And the military is bearing an inordinate brunt of that. And I don't think beyond 2014 that we can expect our military to do what we want them to do and force them to live under the sequestration numbers. We're going to have to come to some sort of grips with something that does the one thing that everybody agrees the Constitution says, and that is you defend the country. And we ought to do that well, spend what money is needed, not extra, but spend what money is needed to do that. And then if there's money left over, do all the other nonsense that we ask government to do. I don't sense any fix on the sequestration for 2014. We're going to hammer the Defense Department one more time with this nonsense, plus a CR, which doesn't allow them to even take the money they do get and move it around in ways that make sense, because Congress has failed to get the appropriations process done properly. Now, one of the things we'll do with the CR is we will attach the 4 or 5 bills, appropriations bills that we've passed. We will attach that to the CR so that it will say, with respect to defense spending, and we've passed that one, here's how you spend the limited dollars that you're going to get, as opposed to the way the CR would make them do that. And we'll see if we can hold that in the House, and that whole operation's in control. But we're doing significant harm to our capacity to defend this country. Not necessarily the capability. We'll always have the best. We just won't have enough of it. And you know, the $487 billion cut that was a part of the Budget Control Act, 80,000 soldiers, 20,000 Marines out, ships and planes not bought on the right pace and the right schedule, a degradation of our ability to fight. And we did this after World War II, we did it after Korea, we did it after Vietnam, we did it after Cold War. We have an inability to see historically how stupid we get when we come out of a fight. And we're coming out of this fight and we're weary and we're tired, our team is, but that's no time to under-resource what we need to be doing. And I'm not going to speak to the sexual harassment thing because that's just the nature of the beast right now. We've got people who have done things they shouldn't have done. None of us can condone it. The leadership is trying to figure out a way to stop it and go to zero tolerance, and that's the right answer. And it's just the ruckus de jour. It's stunningly important that's going on, and none of us can condone that. But with respect to the information that's out there from time to time that this wing is no longer operational because they can't fly the number of hours they're supposed to fly, or we've done this or that, that's being driven by sequestration. Again, I'm unwilling to back off of it at this point because it's the only tool we've had so far that has reduced discretionary spending. Now, there are those who would argue, yeah, but we spend more money every year than we spent last year. And the answer to that is yes. 10,000 baby boomers a day roll into Medicare. And so the 2/3 of the budget that is not touched by the CR or the sequestration, that kind of stuff, that 2/3 is growing faster than we can cut the 1/3. It's just math. We've trimmed that 1/3. I think the number, we're going to be back close to 2008 levels of spending dollars, absolute dollars, on the discretionary side. But yet we'll spend more money than we spent in 2008 because the 2/3 is on autopilot, is continuing to grow, and we cannot we can't get this president to come to the table and discuss renegotiating the Medicare, renegotiation of Social Security, all those hard things that we've got to do. We can't get this guy to come to the table on, and that juggernaut of unsustainability is at full speed, and he won't lead in that arena to help us address that issue. So sequestration is with us at least another year. John Boehner was asked
last summer, how long is it gonna last? He said, it's a long land for 9 more years, unless this president comes to the table and does some smart things with us. Yes, sir. Oh, hey, first off, I was rude. Thank you for your service, your husband's service, your future service.